So I am founder or co-founder of 4 separate online education businesses that are active and trading today. And each of these businesses fills a very specific role in my life. And I've either designed them or kind of strategically gotten involved in them in order to fulfill a certain need that I have or a certain thing that I wanted in my life. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk through these different businesses and talk about why I've done those and why I've made the decisions I have. And this is important because a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with struggle with this tension between making business growth decisions and then making decisions that are right for them. It's a strong belief of mine that the secret to a happy entrepreneurial life is balancing these decisions. So understanding where you're making decisions that are purely fueled by ego or unrestrained ambition, and then understanding what decisions you need to make for your life, which may involve some kind of compromise. I've become highly attuned to this over the years, and I think I've got quite good at detecting in others when they are maybe making decisions that are out of alignment with what they truly want for their life. So hopefully this will be useful. In case you don't know me, my name's Olly Richards. I'm the founder of StoryLearning.com. It's a multi-million-dollar online education business. I'm also a mentor and advisor to other online education entrepreneurs. So my main business is StoryLearning, which I founded back in 2013. It's a language learning business that has both like digital courses, a lot of online media, plus a range of 25 published books, which we're adding more to, which is quite cool. And this was never intended to be a business. You know, I was working a job in the Middle East in an English teaching center. And I just started a language learning blog on the side because it was my passion. I wanted to talk about the thing that I was good at, that was language learning and language teaching. And that kind of took on a life of its own from there. And I stayed almost exclusively focused on story learning for the first 8, 9, 10 years. And I think one of the reasons that story learning has become successful is because I did focus on it during that time. I didn't get distracted. I see a lot of entrepreneurs who get so distracted by investment opportunities and things like that, starting new businesses. They get carried away and end up removing their focus from their main vehicle for business growth, for wealth creation, whatever it may be. So anyway, I stuck with story learning without doing anything else really seriously for the first 10 years or so. And then since then, there are 3 other businesses that have emerged from there. So the first of these to begin was a business called Creator Empires, which I founded with I co-founded with my partner Jan. And what Creator Empires, we've been through a few different variations of this business, but essentially now we run community for people in the language learning space. Back in the day, I mean, it was probably like 2018 when we first started doing things in this space. The creator economy wasn't fully established. There were quite a few people doing language learning things, but not actually that many, nowhere near as many as there are today. And so we kind of ducked and dived a little bit between language learning and wider niches, and we've ended up coming back full circle to the language learning space. And so now we run like the main online community for anyone doing language related work online. But we have an online community with quarterly meetings. We run live events and masterminds and things like that. And we have some of the biggest names in the language space who come to these. And if you are in the language space, you should let us know and come and join. So what Creator Empires does is essentially it's leveraging the experience that myself and Jan had in the language space, and then using that to become thought leaders really in the language space. Because most people don't really organize things. They like to be part of networks, but they don't kind of take it upon themselves to organize things. But there are just incredible things that come downstream from being the person in your space who makes things happen, who organizes things, who brings people together, who actively rejects this notion of competition and says, like, we're all better and stronger when we are together and learning from each other. So that's very much the positioning that we have here. And my business partner takes much more of a front seat on that. I come to the events, but I'm not really actively involved in any of the operational stuff. So that was the first step. From there, then I started my personal brand, my business brand at ollyrichards.co, which is obviously this channel. And the idea here was that I developed this store of expertise in the education space from story learning, but I'd also, over many years, had people from all different kinds of niches, friends, colleagues, people that I met, come to me asking for advice. And so I started to see inside a lot of different businesses outside the language space. And there came a point after about 10 years of running story learning where I thought to myself, I'm spending more time now thinking and talking about business than I am about languages. And so I mean, my WhatsApp was like chock full of people messaging me saying, hey, Ollie, what would you do here? What would you do? Can you give me some advice on this, that, and the other? And so eventually I started to think, look, for all the time I'm spending just replying to messages, I may as well just like write this stuff in an email and send out a newsletter, which is what I did. And so I began the brand in early 2023, I think it was. And all I did for ages was just write a newsletter. But this was basically me saying the most valuable thing that I have as a professional person is now actually no longer my language learning knowledge, but it's my business knowledge, or more specifically my knowledge of online education. And so I'm going to start a brand here because I believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, that's actually the place where I'm going to be able to be the most valuable for other people. But there's more to it, which I'll circle back to. And then a couple of years after that, then when ChatGPT came and the whole AI revolution began, we started Teacher AI, and I am one of 4 co-founders in Teacher AI, and I'm not involved operationally at all. But I was able again to just use springboard audience that I had and experience I had from StoryLearning to help get the business off the ground. And this was again, it was kind of related to really from our work from Creative Empires. So it's kind of fusing together the platform that I had, the community that we'd built over here for all the different people in the language space, and then using that together to lean into this new opportunity that was over here. And so specifically what Teacher AI does is it is AI chat for languages. So if you want to practice your Spanish, you can go and you can do that with a very realistic conversation partner, which is obviously AI. Now, when people talk to me about these various different businesses from the outside, they often say things like, how's your business empire going? Because they see all these different projects, and I understand why people think of it that way. But really, for me, all this has been one long continuous journey of asking myself, where do I have value? Where do I have emerging knowledge and expertise? And what are all the different ways that I can actually use it and deploy it? At the same time, it's been a question of me asking myself, what do I want from my life? And one of the things I think I've been quite good at over the years is acknowledging what I do and don't want in my business or businesses and making decisions based on that. And that has led me to a very fortunate place where obviously the businesses are not only doing very well, but also I have a life that I really enjoy and I really appreciate. And I know that's not the case for everyone. Some of the most unhappy business owners I know are those who have built 7-figure businesses, or even who have sold their businesses for tens of millions. And these are the people who are typically not very happy because either they realize that they've built something that they don't actually want, they've built themselves a prison of sorts that they don't want to live in, or else they've been building and scaling a business to what they thought would be the ultimate life when they finally exit and sell and get all that money, and then realize, hang on, that wasn't ever the point in the first place. I didn't understand it before I sold. And I think because I'm a very stubborn person, I have always been quite stubborn about respecting the things that I wanted from life. And when I reach a crossroads in the business, trying to make decisions that allow me to grow and scale the companies, but also to retain the things that I want in my life. So with StoryLearning, I think my favorite time in the business was right back at the beginning when I first got started. Because at the beginning it was just me blogging, making videos, learning languages, just doing the very creative thing when I had a full-time job. And it became a lot more intense when I quit my job around the same time as my daughter was born, it's 2015, and moved back to London. And now there was like a kind of oh shit moment where I realized, now I've got to make this work, otherwise I'm going to have to go and get a job and move back to another country somewhere, which I really didn't want to do. I was very happy to be back. So I realized I had to make it work, and that's when the pressure began. And so I started working really hard. I signed up to masterminds like Russell Brunson's Inner Circle, went to the US a lot, invested in coaches, started building my team. And it was all successful and it all worked. But it was a stressful time because, I was fighting external pressures. And I think these external pressures, all of us go through them at some point. And in the early stages of a business, the first 5 years are just usually that there's no way of getting around the hustle and the grind. No business has a God-given right to exist. You have to will it into existence. And the only way to do that typically is through hustle. The real question is what happens after that. So, when StoryLearning started becoming, this was the first few years, and then we kind of had that hockey stick moment, about 5 years in. And this is when I started to build team. And I'm very fortunate that I had some very good coaches, business coaches around that time, who helped me understand the need to build team outside myself so that the various functions of the business could grow. And it was around this time that I switched the business to become StoryLearning as opposed to the personal brand it was before. Define the methodology such that other people could deliver the product and it didn't have to be me. So for example, if we wanted to make a Mandarin Chinese course, it was using the StoryLearning method. It wasn't the Olly show, it was the StoryLearning method. So we could find a Chinese teacher to come in, use our method to create the course. And then I built a team around that who were able to project manage the whole thing, which meant that I was able to step back from all of that. And although there was a kind of very intense period where we were like building all of these systems and structures, what happened was when I kind of came out the other end, this was just around, sort of pre-COVID time, what happened was that we were now, a business that was doing 7 figures in revenue, 7 figures in profit. We were doing very, very, very well. And I wasn't needed because I'd worked myself out of the business. I was just kind of happy making a YouTube video every week. And the business really had given me, I'd succeeded in every sense that I wanted to succeed. But this was a very, very valuable lesson, because one of the things I realized when we got to this kind of escape velocity point, and I had all the money and the freedom and the time and all of these things, I realized that actually I was pretty unhappy because I was no longer involved energetically inside the business. We'd reached a level of scale where my job now was not the creative person making the video, sending the emails with my finger on the pulse. I was much more of a manager. I was looking at spreadsheets and trying to make decisions from a distance. That had to happen. It's what I was needed for in the business at that point. Having such little contact with the business day to day, nuts and bolts of it, I just wasn't very happy. And I had this dissonance, because on the one hand I thought, there's no reason I can't get stuck in and do all this creative stuff in the business. But then I realized, but then I've got this 7-figure business over here. I'm not being responsible if I don't manage it. And so there was this kind of tension. And what I realized ultimately was that I wasn't particularly needed in the business because the team was doing a great job. So it was better for me to actually apply my energy elsewhere. And this is around the time I started thinking to myself, okay, where is my career capital? At the time in StoryLearning, for every hour I put in, the output from that, the effect of that was almost invisible because the business was its own entity at this point. Okay? But I wanted to be doing something where if I put an hour of work in, I got 10 hours of results out the other end. And so this is why I made the decision to start my business brand, because I was essentially kind of going back to exactly what I was doing back in the day with StoryLearning, which was me with some expertise, just putting my message out there to the world through sending emails and making videos like I'm doing now. And so I moved headlong into this. And at first it was just a kind of passion project. I thought, look, rather than just wallowing over here in StoryLearning, why don't I do this extra thing on the side to see if that scratches the itch? And it did. And I was super energized again. I was really enjoying the subject matter. I was really enjoying hearing from people business owners who would email me. I really felt like I was in my element. And it scratched the itch so much that I decided, well, I want to go into this. I want to go into it like hook, line, and sinker, because I just felt that that was where the energy was. And most importantly, I've been through a period in my life where I had the experience that an exited founder would have. So exited founder, spends 5-10 years building a business, doesn't really take much money from it, and then one day sells, has all the money they need and all the time in the world. I kind of had that situation without having sold my business. I had enough cash flow to do whatever I wanted comfortably. I also had all the time I needed. And I realized, I managed to learn that lesson that, hey, it's not about, at least for me, it's not about the money and the business success and all of that. All of that stuff is, we think that's what we want, but when you get it, you realize it's just completely empty if you are not also looking after yourself and giving yourself the things that you need. So I started really looking at my values and the way that I wanted to spend my time, and I realized that creativity and teaching and experience and all of these things were central to what makes me tick as a human. And this was the business that was giving it to me. So I lent into that, and I sent daily emails, and I made YouTube videos, and I would reply to every email that I get. I still try to do that now, although I don't always succeed. And then eventually I started monetizing it, not voluntarily. I had a few entrepreneurs who were on my list who would start hounding me over email saying, Ollie, like, I know you're not offering any mentorship or whatever, but just what's it going to take? And eventually I said, okay, I realized this is what I want to be doing, actually, working with smart people. So let's do something. And I put an offer together, and it kind of emerged from there. And sure enough, I realized I really enjoyed it. Now, this was interesting because one of the main goals I always had with StoryLearning was freedom. I wanted to build the passive income digital model so that I could go and live on a beach somewhere. I thought that's what I wanted. And so I built it. I succeeded in doing the thing. We were doing 7 figures in profit, purely digital. I didn't have anything to do. And yet it was still unfulfilling. So when I started reckoning with the fact, okay, if I want to help people over here, I'm going to have to do calls. I'm going to have to get on Zoom and talk to customers one-to-one. Is this really what I want? And I wasn't sure about it because it went against my sort of theoretical image of what I wanted to build as a business. But sure enough, I realized when I actually started doing it that, damn, this is the most fun, fulfilling, enriching stuff that I've done for years and years and years. And then it all made sense because I realized that my values were all about teaching, all about creativity, is working with people's community, having that connection with people and having that impact. That's the stuff that I love. And it's the stuff that I'd stopped having with StoryLearning because it had just got too big. So this was a major learning point. So I started doing more and more one-to-one mentorship through this business, and I loved every minute of it. And then I started asking myself, well, how can I do more of this? So I started running masterminds and got people together in castles down in Hobbitshire where I live and started to create all of these experiences. And the more I did, the more I loved it. And as is often the case when you find flow in your life and your business, the money followed. So this became a 7-figure business in year 2. Again, without me even having to do much. I wasn't in business building mode. I was just purely in flow mode. And I know that sounds horribly woo-woo and all of this, but it was me fundamentally understanding what my store of value was and then opening up, like making an incision in the space-time continuum and saying, like, okay, I'm going to insert myself here. This is where, and then you find that flow, and then the universe reacts by sending you the people who you are supposed to come into contact with as a result of that work. And I kind of hear these words coming out of my mouth and don't fully believe it myself because it just sounds too esoteric, but that is exactly what happened. And you see this in businesses and in entrepreneurs that have flow. The more you lean into it and the more you accept that rather than fighting against a tide that's just going the wrong way, the easier things get. So with OllyRidges.co, I ended up becoming busier than I had been for years, but I was also way happier than I'd been. I started running dinners in London with my friend Noel. And by the way, if you're in the UK and you want to come to one of our monthly dinners, drop me a line. If you have an established business, you'd be very welcome to join us. So I had more entrepreneurs around me, more community and all of these things. And honestly, it was just great. And I really enjoyed it. Now, around the same time with Creator Empires, we decided to kind of do a 180 and go back to focusing on the language learning community for the reasons I gave earlier. Right? We had tried to go off and work with creators in different niches, but it wasn't quite working for various reasons. And in the meantime, the creator economy had exploded and there were more and more language businesses, and we realized actually this is kind of what we like and what we enjoy. Both myself and Jan have a language background, we have language businesses. And when we sit down over a beer and talk about what should we do with the business, for us it was really quite straightforward. Both of us said, like, we're not going to do this by ourselves. Like, Jan was only going to do it if I was involved. I was only going to do it if Jan was involved. And what we really wanted to do was just run cool events in London and in various tropical locations where we go and rent a villa for a week and people fly in and we talk about language and business and enjoy the food and the drink. Like, that is what we wanted to do. And so Creator Empires is not a particularly big business. It's a 6-figure business, but it's something that for both myself and my business partner, it just fits very neatly into our lives and gives us something very, very nourishing that we enjoy doing. And so we are very, very content with that being exactly where it is, because it's just life enhancing in every way. We only do things that we enjoy with the people that we enjoy, and it's just like a nice way to live. Now, when Teacher AI came around, this was an interesting one because I have always avoided software like the plague. I'm not a tech guy. Anyone that knows me will confirm. I don't know the first thing about tech, although I am trying. But I'm not a tech guy. It's just not my strength. I know which my lane is, and I try to stay in it. But because of the various people involved in the founding team of Teacher AI, which again was a mix of like what we're doing for Creator Empires, StoryLearning, and also language learning people that we'd known and been friends with for years, it was a very organic thing to do, and it was, again, was following the path of flow that I spoke about earlier. It was an emerging technology. There was a group of us who were interested in that. We had the audience, we had the capability, kind of, although that was a bit rocky at the beginning. And so we just followed the breadcrumbs. But I had already learned the lessons by that point about everything I've just described here, through StoryLearning, through Olly Richards, through Creator Empires, various companies I'd invested in. I knew where the danger signs were. I knew what would take me into territory that I didn't want to get into. And I knew very clearly from the beginning that if we were starting a tech company with everything that comes along with building software and growth hacking and all of this, this is not my world. I don't want to be in this world. And if I was in this world, I would probably do more harm than good. And so I was very clear from the start. Like, I like the project, it makes sense. The people involved are all long-time friends of mine, and I would like to be involved and support it. And also, from a kind of broader business cycle perspective, these are all very kind of very offline businesses. It's appealing to have some kind of upside exposure to AI, to software, so that, you know, as things evolve in the online world, you know, it's diversification of a kind. And I'm very glad that I did that, because you know, the online world is changing a lot at the moment. We've been affected by that at StoryLearning because of the nature of the online course business that we run, plus exposure to Google. And so I'm seeing that the diversification that I've done has been very, very good for me personally, because I'd be in a very different place right now if all of my eggs were in the StoryLearning basket. And this speaks to a kind of fundamental truth, I think, of growing businesses, and it has been exactly what's happened in my journey, which is that, you know, I do feel like that if this is the 7-figure mark here, you're growing a business, you really do want to do just one thing until you sort of reach this inflection point. And this can come in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Like, you know, most businesses never reach 7 figures, but when they do, the time it takes is not what matters. What matters is that really this whole period here should be a question of focus and nothing else. Diversification is the enemy until you get to this kind of scale. But once you are at the 7-figure scale in revenue terms, then actually it does make sense to have a few more legs to the stool, because now you have something to lose. And the bigger the business gets, the more risk you carry, because you are just more susceptible to market movements, to algorithm changes and things like that. The bigger you get, the more risk there is. But also the bigger you get, the more opportunities you have. You can start to use the audience that you've built or the expertise that you've developed in order to create fresh value in new areas. And so that is the story of how I've ended up with all these various different education businesses, and had a lot of fun along the way, built a life that I feel has been built intentionally, where I look forward to every day. And although I'm working harder than ever now, it's all on stuff that is nourishing and enriching. So I hope somewhere inside this there's some inspiration for you about your own career, your own life, your own businesses. And if you want to understand the current state of the online education world, what's happening, what's changing, and what you should be doing to adapt to those changes, then you might like to check out this video over here, which is quite long, but I run through everything that's going on, and it's very useful for you as an online education business owner.